Hey everybody, welcome to From Struggle to Strength, where we explore personal journeys of resilience and transformation. I'm your host, Rob Cooper. As a veteran and someone who continues to navigate my own personal development, I've learned the importance of sharing the stories and the power of the recovery community. In each episode, I will be sitting down with inspiring guests who have faced their own battles only to emerge stronger. We'll dive deep into conversations about the struggles we face, the steps we take in recovery, how we can ultimately find strength in our most challenging moments. My own journey from military service to personal crisis and eventually to founding Zero Hour Life Center has taught me that nobody should have to face their darkest hours alone. This podcast is a platform for voices that uplift, experiences that empower, and stories that resonate with all of us. Join us as we listen, learn, and grow together from struggle to strength. You're not alone in your journey, and each story shared here is a reminder of that enduring truth. Without further ado, welcome to this edition of the Struggle to Strength podcast.
All right. Welcome back to Struggle to Strength, second episode. And I have this week, our guest is Cheyenne Wallace, and this is very I'm grateful to have her here, and this is very monumental for me to have her on here. I have watched Cheyenne grow from when I first met her, and I let her tell her story and all that good stuff, to who she is now, and from the struggle to the strength. So, and now she's in strength mode. So welcome, Cheyenne, and glad you can join me today. So introduce yourself to the audience.
So my name is Cheyenne Wallace. I guess a little bit about myself is 33 years old. I'll be 34 this year in September. I'm a mother to two boys, ages 14 and 7. And I'm a person in long-term recovery. So I'm ready for your questions, Mr. Cooper.
So thank you for that introduction. Thank you for what you do. We're gonna dive back into, before I met you and to the time that I did meet you, and to what you're doing. So tell a bit about how you went through addiction, and tell me how you went through that struggle, and let's dive on that, because really for this podcast, for Struggle to Strength, I want to highlight people that been through the struggle and now they're in strength mode, so we can put a message out there so people can look at this later on and say, wow, this really touched me, and if it happened to her, I know this can happen to me. So talk about that time.
Yeah, so I would say it started in my childhood, which it does for probably almost every person that ever struggled with substances. But I was raised by a single mother. My dad was in and out of my life, but he was really only around a lot until I was about 3 years old. So I'm an only child. And because of that, my mom had to work, hours on end, and I was up to my own vices. Have a small family. And like I said, I'm an only child. So I had that abandonment, feeling, now that I know what I went through and could, put it into words. Obviously at that time I wouldn't have known that, but, so up to my own vices. I would say around, 13, maybe 8th grade is I met, she turned into my best friend, but she had moved, to my school, my middle school that I was at in 8th grade. And, we became best friends, and I started hanging out with her all the time. And, she came from Easton, Pennsylvania. This is back in Pennsylvania where I'm from. And, which is about an hour or so from where I was living, and became best friends. And she kind of introduced me into the lifestyle of drinking and smoking marijuana. And obviously at that time I wouldn't have known that it flipped that switch in my brain that would have taken me to doing heroin years later. But I loved it, and I loved the scene that I was in, and it was fun, right? I felt purpose. I felt wanted. I felt loved. I felt all those insecurities that I dealt with at that time, you know, um, disappeared, for the most part. And I've luckily, and thank God, have never been through any type of sexual or physical abuse, but I would definitely say emotional abuse. My mom did the best she could, but she came from a family of alcoholics, and she also struggled with substances prior to her getting pregnant with me. Um, but a lot of dysfunction, family dysfunction. And so we didn't get along. Me and my mother had a very strenuous relationship, where, I felt she was, the most negative person. And we never had a good relationship. And I could say that up until probably age 26, we really didn't have a good relationship. And so 13, 14, then I enter into high school around that same crowd. That's the people I attracted because that's the environment I wanted to be in, and it went from, marijuana and alcohol to cocaine. Then from cocaine to the scene was ecstasy and shrooms. And, I wanted anything that made me feel happy or better about myself, whatever substance that was, it didn't matter. Um, and that's how I lived my lifestyle all throughout high school. I like to say I'm an intelligent person, so I really kept my grades up. I didn't have to take my finals when I was a senior because I had A's, but besides that, my lifestyle was, I was out of the house every moment I could possibly be, fights with my mom, it was that chaos. And but at that time I really enjoyed it. There wasn't any really negative consequences besides being a teen. You don't get along well with your parents, that's normal. But and then 18 years old, I find out pregnant by my oldest son's father. And I ended up having him at 19. It was a month. He was born in October, and the month prior I had turned 19. So just turned 19. Now I have a baby to take care of. So thankfully I had a lot of support with my son, with his father's grandmother. But as soon as I had him, it was back to the same thing. Every single weekend, he would be dropped off at his grandparents' house, once he was about a month old, and it started that cycle again every weekend. Now, during the week, I was mom and hard worker, but on the weekends, I was still up to drinking, partying, all the drugs, all the behaviors that come along with that, and so I'm sure I'm missing things, in between that, I've obviously done things I shouldn't have, driven drunk, I skipped a part two. When I was 15, I actually got an underage, I got an underage drinking charge. And so it just continued to progress, and I stayed around those same type of people, that same, that wanted to party, that wanted to do drugs, that wanted to drink, that lifestyle, and I would say I really never thought I had a problem until I started taking pills. So I had surgery when I was 23, 22. I had surgery and I was prescribed Percocet 5 milligram. And I didn't even like them, and the people I was hanging out with, I was just, I sold them to them, because that's a lifestyle. You're selling things, you're, stealing things, whatever. So I sold them to the people, I hung around with. And then I started dating another guy, and he was into pills. He was into, the Percocets and the Roxys and the, all that stuff. And very quickly, that was my drug of choice. And couple months after I started taking pills, I find out that my son's father overdosed and he was in the hospital. And he was my first true love. I was with him for 6 years. First person I really truly felt that I loved. And, you know, at that time, I didn't really know anything about opiate addiction. Like I said, I've taken a couple pills, wasn't physically addicted to them at this point. But he was in the hospital in the ICU hooked up to a breathing machine. And a couple weeks later, we find out that he has a quarter size left of his brain that's active. And, you know, they had to pull the plug, you know, or else he would have been a vegetable. So that took me way down to the depths of hell. I did not want to feel any feelings. I was numb. I would cry on the way to work. I would cry at work. I would cry on the way home from work. That really, really deeply negatively affected me. And I didn't know how to deal with emotions. I didn't know how to deal with grief. And just took me off the deep end, especially with pills, you know, and that really became my drug of choice. Of course, I was doing everything else, you know, drinking, became, you know, I drank really heavily at that point. I was over 21, right? You know, so I could get it legally now. And I always make sure to get the Bud Platinum Light or Bud Platinum because it was like 8% alcohol, you know, it was the higher level alcohol. So I would kill a 6-pack of those like no problem. And, you know, so that just continued, you know, and mostly on the weekends, of course, you know, in that lifestyle, I would do it around my son, you know. I would, you know, and I hate to admit this, but this is the truth. I would take my son with me to drug deals, you know, in town. And, you know, that's what addiction does, right? That's all you think about. You don't think about the harm you're causing to the people around you. And, you know, because my mom and I didn't have a really good relationship, you know, she didn't really see all the stuff that I was doing, you know, at this point I was, you know, well, once I turned 19, she actually moved out of the house that we had, and I was living in that house by myself. She had moved out of state. That's a whole nother story, but for a few years. And, you know, so she wasn't even really in my life during that time. And besides phone calls, things like that. But, anyways, fast forward a little bit. I was still holding up strong, still had a full-time job, still had decent credit. You know, was able to, around this time, purchase a brand new car, you know, under just my name. And I was still upholding that lifestyle. And that's why I say opiates really took things downhill. Because that didn't last long. But, so the guy that I'd started dating there, we ended up getting a townhouse. This was 2015. Ended up getting a townhouse. It was really nice. And I opened up a lot of credit cards and incurred a lot of debt to furnish that place. Nice TVs, nice decorations, nice furniture, you know, all that stuff. I just racked up those cards. And at that point, I could not pay it off because all of my money was going to fund my habit. Thankfully, that the opiate using didn't last too long, but I still remember to this day, we couldn't get any pills. And I woke up, you know, if you know about opiate withdrawal, you know what that feels like. And woke up, felt like crap. And I walked downstairs because it was a split level condo. And my significant other at that time was doing heroin. And I was in that rock and hard place because my son's father just died from doing heroin, fentanyl, you know, whatever was in that drug. And I felt horrible, you know, and I chose feeling better than knowing what this drug could have done to me, you know, because that's, like I said, the power it has over you. And so off to the races with heroin. And luckily, like I said, that didn't last too long. 2016, I'm already fed up with this. You know, I know I'm physically dependent. Now I'm an addict. I didn't think I was an addict before that. You know, those were the party drugs. Those were the fun times. I didn't see too many consequences from that, you know, but now I'm like, okay, now I'm a drug addict, right? You know, I'm physically dependent on drugs. And, so I was scared to say it, but I did reach out because I have my son with me, you know, and I'm like, how am I going to go to rehab or do any type of treatment if I have to take care of my son? And thankfully, his grandmother on his dad's side was like, I'll take him for you while you go into treatment. And this was definitely a God moment. This was in, like I said, still in Pennsylvania. And they have, can't remember the name of it, but they have a organization that helps people get into treatment that do not have the funds for it. And usually it's state funded treatment centers, so they're really not the best, you know, and I hate to say that, but it is what it is, you know, they're not the best. And somehow I was chosen to go to the Karen Foundation, which is a top-notch residential treatment facility. This was in Warnersville, Pennsylvania, but they also have a location in Florida too. But a $30,000 a month program I got to go to for free. And so was there for 30 days, did the sober living thing afterwards, and cut off contact with my significant other at that time. I was done. You know, I was done with the toxicity in our relationship and all, you know, all that comes along with it. And so that lasted a couple months, and then I was still, my behaviors were still not changed. You know, I was still in that mindset of you can't tell me what to do. I'm going to do what I want to do. You know, I'm not using, but I was never a rule follower. I always had a problem with authority, you know, and I knew what was best for me. I knew right. You know, you couldn't tell me nothing. So but that lasted 4 months, and I decided to get on Facebook Messenger and reach out to my ex and just say, hey, how you doing? I knew that he had went to a rehab, and so he was sober. And long story short, we ended up hanging out. That lasted about 2 or 3 times hanging out, and we were back to our vices. And because I had sobriety under my belt and my tolerance went down, I very quickly overdosed for the very first time. And that was terrifying, waking up from that with EMS in my face. And this happened at his dad's house. I'm on the floor, 2 o'clock in the morning, wake up with EMS in my face. I finally figure out where I'm at, like kind of what happened. And, you know, went to the hospital, and, you know, they release you the same day as long as you're stable, you know, so kind of went back to the same thing. I lessened my use a little bit, you know, wasn't that heavy at that point, but I also knew that I was moving to Florida in August. So this, I would say, happened maybe June or July. This was all going on, 2016. And I knew I was moving to Florida in August because my son's grandparents on his dad's side, they were retiring, and they were like, you want to come to Florida with us? At that point, I had nothing going for me. Sure. So moved to Florida, and then very quickly found out I was pregnant, and was able to, still doing dirty stuff. You know, my son's grandmother was prescribed 10 milligram, I think it was Vicodin or something like that. So that's how I was weaning myself off to not feel like crap, you know.
Right.
And she also was prescribed Xanax. So it was like, you know, I was trying to make myself feel as normal as possible.
Right.
But yeah, and then so, you know, my boyfriend at the time, well, wasn't my boyfriend because I moved, but I let him know the situation. He ended up moving down here. We got our own place in December, and he was sober. I was sober. I was pregnant. And then I had my second son on April 15th of 2017. And then kind of went back to that, you know, same lifestyle, not as heavily. And you know, was doing meth here, you know, met people. Well, he met people, and, you know, kind of started that same process down here, but not as heavy. Went to outpatient treatment here in Florida for the first time at Perspectives, and got on MAT treatment, got on Suboxone, and then got really bad into Xanax because I was so depressed, you know, because the mental health aspect comes along with addiction or before addiction, you know. And so and Xanax made me do a lot of bad things. Obviously, it makes you forget, it makes you
Yeah.
steal, you know. So I'm in stores stealing, and that's how I get arrested for the very first time.
Right.
And end up, I'm gonna skip a little bit because I know I've been talking for a while, but so end up arrested, find out about the drug court program in Marion County Jail. I was only there for like 2.5 days. Find out about the drug court program and start, you know, getting into that. That was August of 2020 is kind of when I really dove into that, and was in treatment, outpatient treatment through the program, was required to do meetings and drug tests and color line check-ins and all that stuff that comes along with it. And was required to do 4 peer support meetings. And those peer support meetings were at 0 Hour Life Center. So that's how I got introduced to Rob and their very small team at the time. I think it was only Rob and Mary. Maybe it was Kyla. I'm not sure, but that was, you know, late 2020 and into 2021, and started to get involved in, you know, their meetings, as well as their sober events, things like that. I really wanted to make a change in my life. And I also call it a God moment, is I was trying so bad to get out of the relationship I was in, but I didn't know how. And he had also gotten arrested and had to do treatment in Orlando. So right there, we were pulled apart, which at that time, did I see it as a good thing? No, because I thought I could never be alone. I was in a relationship for 6 years and then again for 6 years, you know, so I didn't know how to be alone. And I felt abandoned my whole life since childhood. So, you know, the last thing I thought I could do was learn to be alone and be with myself and my thoughts. But that was such a blessing in disguise, you know. And so that's how I got with 0 Hour Life Center. And shortly thereafter started working with 0 Hour Life Center, and you know, continue to work on myself, continue to help others, continue to dive into my spirituality, and, you know, just try to do the next right thing and be the best person I can be. And I'll have 4 years in August of this year. And yeah, so that's a little bit of my background.
And y'all, this is the first time I heard it. So this is the first time I've been knowing Cheyenne for 4 years. And this is the first time that I really heard her story, and very powerful. And while you were telling your story, I was sitting there thinking when I met you, and that was in the drug court, and to that person that I met back then to now, it's total night and day, because you were angry. You were like, it was just, you were just mad. And I was like, why is she always mad? So, but to see you now is like, I really don't see that. I don't remember all that, but I remember that part, because you have really, really done a 180, a 360, and you have really took on to this strength moment that I try to want people to understand, that you can go through struggle, but you can hit the strength moment. And the strength moment is where the magic happens, when everything bursts out of that and you can be the best version of yourself. So I want to go back a little bit. I want to ask you a couple of questions. When was your rock bottom moment? When was that the point where you said, look, I got to get some help. I can't do that. When was that moment?
So I've had a couple. And if, you know, I'll go with my most recent, and that was getting arrested. I mean, it was getting arrested and sitting in jail. So I went from, yes, I got my underage when I was 15 years old, but, you know, that means nothing to a teenager, you know. And so I went from 15 to 29, so 14 years without doing everything illegal under the books, without getting arrested or legal charges, criminal charges, you know. Don't ask me how, but you know, I slipped through the cracks. And I would say, you know, this last time would definitely be the arrest, and sitting in jail and being absolutely miserable with my life. I hated everything about my life, my relationship. I was depressed. I was anxious. I just felt I was at rock bottom. You know, I wanted to die, but could not do that to my children. You know, that's how close it was. I was only living for my children. And, so this time around, that's what it was for me. I would say getting arrested and really being in that mindset as I can't go down any further. I'm at the bottom.
Right.
So,
Right.
mhm.
How did your addiction impact your relationship with your families and friends when you were in that downward spiral and you knew that, okay, I'm an addict now. I'm
Mhm.
full-fledged. How did that impact your family and friends?
So I would say, because my family is very small, I don't have any brothers or sisters. My dad was in and out of my life, so we don't have a relationship. My relationship with my mom is already strained because I want to do my own thing, and I didn't really value family for many years of my, you know, childhood life and adult life. And so, and I know this is different for many people, but because I was by myself, and I didn't really have a lot of people around me besides the people that I was using the drugs with, drinking with, we all wanted that lifestyle at that time. So for my family and friends, besides my son, obviously he was impacted, but family and friends, I don't think, and I'm trying to think outside the box, I don't think they were really too much impacted by my actions, because they were very a small family and my friends are the people I'm using with, right? So friends. But my drug use 100% impacted even those friend relationships, my intimate relationships, was impacted by the drug use because you don't you don't think about anything, mostly anything other than wanting to drink or wanting to use. Everything else takes a second seat. Relationship, love, trying to have a healthy relationship, healthy intimate relationship. I can admit I was emotionally abusive too. When we would fight, we would be yelling and screaming and fighting, and I needed to have the last word. We would say things to hurt each other, and that had to do, mostly because of the drug use and mental health struggles. But and then my child, especially my oldest, he was around it more. And at that time you think you're hiding everything, but I'm sure I was more short-tempered. I'm sure I wasn't watching him and giving him attention like he should have been getting from his mother. you know um at that time, I'm sure I thought I was a good mom, but, looking back, was I really? Because my focus wasn't on him. He wasn't my first priority, So, regardless of having a small family or not a lot of, friends outside of drug use, it affects everybody around you, you know?
Yeah.
Mhm.
So right now, being in recovery and having 4 years, how do you deal with cravings and triggers right now? How do I say this a lot, that it don't matter if you're 40 years in this thing or 24 hours or a week in this thing. A
Mhm.
thought, craving something, you're going to have those. How do you deal with that now? So if anybody's listening to your story, anybody listening to this podcast and probably thinking that, I want to know how she's managing 4 years. How does she do this? How do you deal with triggers and cravings?
Yeah. So, I'm blessed to say, at least right for today, I don't have any cravings. Now your brain thinks. That's what your brain does. So don't get me wrong that, I'll have fleeting thoughts of, ooh, a Xanax will be good right now, will make me feel good. Or, when I go through, when I'm overwhelmed or I feel stressed, which is very few in between, I'm very in control with my emotions nowadays, which, like Rob said, I used to struggle with that. Emotions took control. I didn't have control over my emotions. And, so like I said, I get fleeting thoughts every now and then, but it's a thought. Just because I have a thought doesn't mean I need to act on it. And, I think it all the way through because I know if I pick up once, it's not going to be once. It's going to trigger that, that addiction in my mind that stays there for the rest of my life, that those pleasure, receptors. It's going to trigger that. And right away, my brain's going to be like, I love this. I need this, and I know that's what it's going to take me back to. I can lose my job. I'll probably lose my car. My car got repossessed when I was in addiction. I'll lose, I won't have any money. I'll lose the roof over my head, even if it isn't the best, my relationship with my children, I'm still trying to build. I still don't have my children with me, which I forgot to mention, that crucial part to my story. But there's still things that I'm working on to try to be a better person and be a better mother. And if I use again, all that is gone. All that goes, and I try to think, especially nowadays. I mean, my drug of choice is opiates and benzodiazepines. If I use opiates, I'm dead. That's just the reality of fentanyl, and so I try to think of all the negative consequences that come along with it. I'll also, if I need to, if I feel like it's a thought that won't go away, I'll reach out to somebody. Now my mom and I have a pretty good relationship. My mom, knows my past, and I can reach out to her with anything. I have a good relationship with my coworkers, so that as well, I can always reach out to them. But I really think for me, I just know, I know my thoughts are fleeting. Just because I have a thought, I don't need to act on it.
So now we're moving into the strength mode. I know we stayed in the struggle mode for a little bit. So now let's get on the strength mode.
Okay.
How do you stay motivated, and how do you stay motivated and continue to grow on your recovery path? How do you stay motivated to keep doing this thing? 4 years is a lot of time. 4 years is a lot of time, and I don't take that lightly. 4 years is a lot of time. How do you stay motivated and stay on the beaten path to keep doing the next right thing?
I definitely struggle with motivation, don't get me wrong, but I really think the main things that were different this time is I stay surrounded by people who are like me. I give back. I'm not selfish like I used to be, especially being a single child. I was extremely selfish, and I stopped thinking about me. It's not all about me. I try to make this world a better place, and that can be done in many different ways, but being of service to other people really feeds your soul. So being of service to other people, keeps me motivated. Seeing, especially in the field that I'm in, seeing how quickly I could go back to that lifestyle keeps me motivated to stay in recovery. I got goals, I'm in college. I finally hit my junior year, so I got a little bit less than 2 years left of my bachelor's degree, and I'm not going to waste that money and time I put into that, so I have to keep moving forward, and I think having goals and working towards those goals bit by bit, you got to break them down. You can't have them feel overwhelming, but knowing that you have goals, knowing that you want more in life, knowing that you can do better in life, that's what keeps me motivated.
That's good. And y'all, if you haven't noticed, I have the pleasure of sitting in the front row and sitting in the front seat of Cheyenne life now. And, like I said, this is like night and day, because the Cheyenne that I used to know, the Cheyenne that I used to was just, it was all about her. And now to see her talk about helping others and really being a service and really thinking about other people than herself is what I was always trying to get out of her. And it took a little bit of time for her to see that. So how has your recovery helped you to find purpose and meaning in your life now? How has that helped you? How's your recovery helped you?
So what comes to mind right away is what I just recently mentioned. I think you can't keep what you don't give back. So a huge component to why, at least I believe, why still in recovery today and haven't lapsed or relapsed is because I got outside of myself. I got out of my own way. My purpose, part of my purpose, it's not my whole purpose, but part of my purpose is to help other people and genuinely care about other people. and to help them and see them succeed. You see those little goals that they make, and it just does something to you. It gives you purpose and fulfillment.
Can you share a story of resilience you experienced during your recovery, where you had to be resilient and you had to use resilience to get through?
I mean, I think really just not anything necessarily like a specific time, but I think right now the situation where I'm working towards getting my kids back living with me, that builds resilience because, one, I'm smart enough to know that it's a process and it's not good to jump right in. And because I've been, in long distance kind of relationships with my children for a while now, and I know it's not, I have custody of them, but I know I shouldn't just go and pick them up and move them right back with me. One, it's not good for me. Two, it's not good for them, but building resilience by knowing time is on my side, knowing that patience is on my side, knowing that if I continue to do the next right thing and make hard choices in my life to do better and be better, eventually I'm going to get what I want. Right. So
Mhm.
I think, that building resilience in even though I want something right now, knowing that's not the best decision.
Yeah. And and that's a great, you hit something there, because we see it working in this field. We see it a lot, that what addiction has done, and especially in women, that if they have children, it separate the addiction, separate the mom and the kids. And when the mom get on to a road recovery, they want the kids back so fast. And I think about your journey, and you just said that is you're still, and you didn't lose custody, you still got custody of your kids, but you took time in saying, okay, is this, I want my kids with me, I want that, but is it the right time? And
Mhm.
and really talk about that timing, because sometimes you're still working on yourself, and and like I always say, and I'm sound like a broken record, I always say this, that we're still all healing, and that healing process is taking, there's no timetable on that.
Mhm.
But I took from that what you just said about not getting your kids back so fast. It was not all about you. You thought about them. So if there's a mom out there thinking, and there's a mom out there now that's in still active addiction and wants to get into recovery, have kiddos, you know, talk to that mom. Let that mom understand. Let her hear, something that can really resonate with her, and give her some great wisdom.
Mhm. So the addiction mindset is instant gratification. So wanting what you want right then and now. And it's hard. I think putting down the drugs is almost easier than changing all the behaviors that come along with it, and working through the trauma and all those little things that you don't even think of contributed to your addiction, but they do, and I still struggle with time, but I know that good things take time, and my children are in good spaces right now with the family that they're with, that I would be selfish to go and rip them out of there just because I want them with me. And then also, you know, I I want to be the best version of myself, which, I think I'm doing pretty damn good. But, even environment wise, I want to be in the best environment and the safest environment for my children when they do come back to me. And I'm not quite there yet, at least in my opinion, So, um, I know it's hard. I know it's hard to say no and not quite yet, and time heals and time is on my side, but I really think if I would have jumped right back in and pulled them back with me, I don't know where I would be. I know I would be overwhelmed because kids are overwhelming. You could be the best mom in the world and kids are overwhelming. They're stressful. they add a lot to your plate. You know, you have to worry about childcare. You have to worry about cooking dinner, getting them dressed, you know, everything that comes along with caring for a child. It's a lot. And especially being newer into recovery, you know, of course you want your kids back. And I hear that, you know, but you have to look at the overall picture, you know, and not what you want right that moment.
So I'm gonna ask you two questions, and then we're gonna wrap this thing up. Looking back, first of all, share to the listeners of what you're doing now in this strength moment. And then after you do that, I want to ask you one follow-up question with three more questions. So share with the listeners what you have done in your 4 years since you've been in recovery and what you're doing right now in the strength moment.
Yeah. So, because of the choices I made early in recovery, I surrounded myself with good people, people that are like-minded, people that want to see me grow, you know. And like I said earlier, I'm in my bachelor's degree, and I've already been looking. I have plans to go right into my master's degree for legal studies. You know, I was able to build my credit back up. It's still building, don't get me wrong, but I was able to get a nice car, you know. And it's not always about materialistic things. Really, the biggest blessing I've gotten from recovery is growth, you know, and learning to, you know, take things one moment at a time, learning to, you know, rely on others and ask for help if I need it, building genuine, loving relationships with the people that I'm surrounded, you know, with. My relationships aren't toxic anymore. I got to a point where I don't struggle with my depression or my anxiety anymore. And that's a blessing. That is a blessing, because I was in the, you know, in hell with my mental health, and I have a career, you know. Like I said, I have people that believe in me, you know, and like I said, I take it one day at a time, but I know I'm still young. You know, people say, I don't know if I really feel that way, but I'm still young. And I know I have so much in store for me, you know, and I can do anything I want to do.
My second question is this: if you can go back to that young lady, and what will you tell that young lady that was 14, 15, all the way up to 2020? What will you tell that person? Your future self talking to your past. What will you tell that person in the past?
That I love her and that she's worth it, you know, and that she doesn't have to worry about what other people, you know, think or do or say. And also never pick up an opiate.
That's a good one. That's a good one. Now, my last question, and this was an honor and privilege. If there was one message that you want the listeners to take away from your discussion, from your story, from what me and you talked about today, what would that be?
I hate to sound cliche, but you know, recovery is possible, and it takes a lot of work and dedication. It all comes down to you. You have to make the choice, the decision that you are done, and you will do anything that it takes to be done and not go back.
Yeah, that's good. Mm-hmm. That's good. Well, look, Miss Wallace, it was a pleasure. I'm proud of you. I am really, really, when many people gave up on you and have wanted me to give up on you, I never gave up on you, even through my struggles, even through, you know, stuff I've been through since you know me or whatever. I still haven't gave up on you, and I'm so proud of you, and I can't stress it anymore. And that's why I asked you to come on this podcast, because I know, you know, I didn't know your whole story, but I know you went through some struggle, and now you're on a strength mode. I want people to see before and after, and then understand, you know, that recovery is possible and changing your life is possible. So keep up the good work. Like you said, you can be anything you want to be. And thank you for spending some time with me, and let me interview you and ask you a couple questions, and I appreciate you. Thank you.
Yeah, this wasn't as bad as I thought it would be, but you were definitely a huge, you still are a huge component to my recovery. You know, you've known me from when I entered recovery until now, you know, so and you were integral in that. So I appreciate you too. And yeah, thanks for having me.